Life, my friends, is a journey of transformation. It's a path that leads us from who we are to who we're meant to be. But let me tell you something profound today. To grow, you must suffer. Now, I know that might sound harsh. It might even sound discouraging. But I'm here to tell you that this truth, when understood and embraced, is the key to unlocking your greatest potential. Think about it for a moment. When does a seed grow? When it's comfortable in the packet sitting on a shelf? No. It grows when it's buried in the dark, damp earth. It grows when it's torn apart, when it's forced to push through the soil, fighting its way towards the light. That seed suffers. But through that suffering, it becomes something magnificent. It becomes a plant, a tree, something that can bear fruit and provide shelter. That seed transforms into something far greater than it ever could have been if it had remained comfortable and unchallenged. You see, comfort is the enemy of growth. Comfort tells you to stay where you are, to avoid risks, to shy away from challenges. Comfort whispers in your ear, why bother? You're fine just as you are. But let me tell you something, fine is not enough. Fine is mediocre, fine is average. And you, my friend, were not created to be average. You were created for greatness. You were designed with potential that far exceeds what you can imagine right now. But that potential, it's like a muscle. If you don't stretch it, if you don't push it to its limits, it will never grow. It will never reach its full capacity. So how do we grow? We grow through challenges. We grow through hardships. We grow when life pushes us to our limits and forces us to become more than we are. Think about physical training for a moment. When you're working out, when do your muscles grow? Is it when you're sitting on the couch, remote in hand, watching TV? No. Your muscles grow when you're in the gym, pushing weights, feeling the burn, pushing past the point where your body is screaming at you to stop. That's suffering. That's pain. But it's also growth. Because when you push through that pain, when you endure that suffering, your muscles respond. They grow stronger, bigger, more capable. The same principle applies to every area of your life. Your mind grows when you tackle difficult problems, when you push yourself to learn new skills, when you step out of your comfort zone and into the realm of the unknown. Your character grows when you face moral dilemmas, when you're tested, when you have to make tough decisions that challenge your integrity. Your spirit grows when you face disappointments, when you deal with loss, when you have to pick yourself up after failure. Now, I'm not saying you should go out looking for suffering. I'm not advocating that you make your life unnecessarily difficult. But I am saying that when suffering comes, and it will come, because that's part of life, you shouldn't run from it. You shouldn't hide from it. You should face it head on, knowing that on the other side of that suffering is growth. Let me share a personal story with you. When I was a young man, I had dreams of becoming a leader, of making a difference in my community. But I was shy. I was uncomfortable speaking in front of people. The thought of addressing a crowd made my palms sweat and my heart race. I could have stayed in that comfort zone. I could have said, well, I guess public speaking just isn't for me. But I knew that to grow, to become the leader I wanted to be, I had to push through that discomfort. I had to suffer through the anxiety, the fear of failure, the potential embarrassment. So I pushed myself. I took every opportunity to speak, even when my voice shook, even when I stumbled over my words. I endured the discomfort, the self-doubt, the criticism. And you know what? It was painful. It was suffering. But through that suffering, I grew. Each time I spoke, I got a little more comfortable. Each time I faced my fear, it lost a little bit of its power over me. And over time, that shy young man who could barely string 2 words together in front of a crowd became someone who could inspire thousands. That's the power of embracing suffering for the sake of growth. That's what happens when you're willing to be uncomfortable, to be challenged, to be pushed beyond your limits. Now, let's be clear about something. Not all suffering leads to growth. There's a difference between productive suffering and needless suffering. Productive suffering is the kind that challenges you, that pushes you to become better. Needless suffering is the kind that just tears you down without any purpose. The key is to recognize the difference. When you face a challenge, when you encounter suffering, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger? How can this help me grow? You can find an answer to those questions, then embrace that suffering, push through it. Use it as fuel for your growth. But if the suffering is needless, if it's not serving any purpose other than to tear you down, then that's the kind of suffering you need to remove from your life. That's the kind of suffering that stunts your growth rather than promoting it. Let me give you an example. If you're in a job that challenges you, that pushes you to learn new skills, that forces you out of your comfort zone, that's productive suffering. It might be difficult, it might be stressful, but it's helping you grow. But if you're in a job where you're constantly belittled, where your efforts are never appreciated, where you're not learning or growing, that's needless suffering. That's the kind of situation you need to change. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference. The strength lies in embracing the productive suffering and eliminating the needless suffering. Now, I want to address something important here. When I say to grow, you must suffer, I'm not glorifying suffering. I'm not saying that suffering in itself is good. What I'm saying is that suffering is often the pathway to growth, and that when we understand this, we can use our suffering as a tool for transformation. Think about it like this. When a caterpillar enters its cocoon, it undergoes a process called histolysis. Essentially, its body dissolves into a kind of soup. All of its structures break down before it can rebuild itself into a butterfly. That's suffering on an unimaginable scale. The caterpillar ceases to exist as it once was. But without that suffering, without that complete breakdown, the butterfly could never emerge. Your life is like that cocoon. The challenges you face, the hardships you endure, they're breaking down your old self. They're dissolving the person you used to be. And that process is painful. It's uncomfortable. It's suffering. But on the other side of that suffering, that's where the butterfly emerges. That's where you become the person you were always meant to be. So when you face challenges, when you encounter suffering, don't ask, why is this happening to me? Instead, ask, how is this changing me? How is this helping me grow? What am I becoming through this process? When you shift your perspective like this, suffering becomes an opportunity rather than an obstacle. It becomes a tool for growth rather than a barrier to happiness. Now, I want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean you should seek out suffering. It doesn't mean you should make your life unnecessarily difficult. What it means is that when suffering comes, and it will come because that's part of life, you have a choice in how you respond to it. You can let it break you down, or you can let it build you up. You can let it defeat you, or you can let it develop you. You can see it as a curse, or you can see it as a catalyst for your growth. The choice is yours, and it's a choice you'll have to make over and over again throughout your life. Let me share another story with you. There was a time in my life when I faced a significant setback. A project I had poured my heart and soul into fell apart. Years of work seemed to go down the drain in an instant. I was devastated. I felt like a failure. In that moment, I had a choice. I could have given up. I could have said, well, I guess I'm not cut out for this. I could have let that failure define me. But instead, I chose to see that suffering as an opportunity for growth. I asked myself, what can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger? How can I use this experience to become better? And you know what? That failure, as painful as it was, taught me more than any success ever could. It taught me resilience. It taught me the importance of adaptability. It showed me where my weaknesses were and gave me the opportunity to strengthen them. That suffering became the foundation for future success. It became a turning point in my life, not because it was easy, but precisely because it was hard. This is the paradox of growth through suffering. The very things that seem to be breaking us down are often the things that are building us up. The challenges that seem to be holding us back are often the things that are propelling us forward. But here's the key. This only happens when we choose to embrace the suffering, when we choose to see it as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. So how do we do this? How do we embrace suffering as a tool for growth? First, we need to change our perspective on suffering. Instead of seeing it as something to be avoided at all costs, we need to see it as a necessary part of the growth process. Just like we understand that the pain of exercise is necessary for physical growth, we need to understand that emotional, mental, and spiritual pain is often necessary for personal growth. Second, we need to develop resilience. Resilience isn't about being unaffected by suffering. It's about being able to bounce back from it, to learn from it, to use it as fuel for our growth. Resilience is like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it becomes. Third, we need to practice gratitude even in the midst of suffering. This might sound strange, but hear me out. When we're grateful even for the small things, even in the midst of challenges, it shifts our focus. Instead of being consumed by our suffering, we start to see the opportunities within it. Fourth, we need to surround ourselves with the right people. When we're going through tough times, when we're suffering, we need people around us who will encourage us, who will remind us of our potential, who will help us see the growth opportunities in our challenges. Fifth, we need to maintain a long-term perspective. In the moment, suffering can feel overwhelming. It can feel like it will last forever. But when we step back and look at the bigger picture, we can often see how that suffering is shaping us, molding us, preparing us for something greater. Now, I want to address something important here. When I talk about embracing suffering for the sake of growth, I'm not talking about enduring abuse or staying in truly harmful situations. If you're in a situation that is genuinely harmful to your physical or mental health, that's not the kind of suffering that leads to growth. That's the kind of situation you need to get out of. What I'm talking about is the kind of suffering that comes from pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. The kind that comes from facing your fears, from taking on challenges, from striving for something greater than what you are right now. This kind of suffering, the suffering that leads to growth. It's not comfortable. It's not easy, but it is worth it. Because on the other side of that suffering is growth. On the other side of that suffering is transformation. On the other side of that suffering is the person you were always meant to be. So I challenge you today, when you face difficulties, when you encounter suffering, don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Face it head on. Ask yourself, how can this help me grow? What can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger? And then embrace it. Push through it. Use it as fuel for your growth. Remember, the seed must break open for the plant to grow. The caterpillar must dissolve for the butterfly to emerge. And you, my friend, must be willing to suffer if you want to grow. But here's the beautiful thing. When you embrace this truth, when you're willing to suffer for the sake of growth, you'll find that you're capable of far more than you ever imagined. You'll find strength you didn't know you had. You'll discover talents you didn't know were there. You'll unlock potential that has been dormant inside you all along. And as you grow, as you transform, you'll be able to make a greater impact on the world around you. You'll be able to serve others more effectively. You'll be able to fulfill the purpose for which you were created. So don't shy away from the challenges. Don't run from the suffering. Embrace it, use it, grow through it, because on the other side of that suffering is a version of you that is stronger, wiser, more capable, more resilient. On the other side of that suffering is the person you were always meant to be. Now let's dive deeper into this concept of growth through suffering. Let's explore how it applies to different areas of our lives. In our professional lives, growth often comes through taking on challenges that stretch us beyond our current capabilities. It might mean volunteering for a project that you're not sure you can handle. It might mean applying for a promotion that feels just out of reach. It might mean starting your own business even when you're filled with doubt and fear. These situations are uncomfortable. They're stressful. They might even cause you to lose sleep at night. But it's through these challenges that you develop new skills, gain confidence, and become more valuable in your field. In our personal relationships, growth often comes through conflict and difficult conversations. It's easy to avoid confrontation, to sweep issues under the rug, but real growth in relationships comes when we're willing to have those tough conversations, to work through our differences, to face our own shortcomings and make changes. This process can be painful. It can make us feel vulnerable and exposed. But it's through this process that our relationships deepen, that we learn to communicate more effectively, that we become better partners, friends, and family members. In our spiritual lives, growth often comes through periods of doubt and questioning. It's easy to coast along, never really examining our beliefs or challenging our assumptions. But real spiritual growth comes when we wrestle with difficult questions, when we face our doubts head on, when we're willing to let go of comfortable certainties in search of deeper truths. This process can be unsettling. It can make us feel lost and uncertain. But it's through this process that our faith becomes our own, that our beliefs become more nuanced and mature, that we develop a deeper, more authentic spirituality. In our physical health, growth comes through pushing our bodies to their limits. It's comfortable to stick with our usual routines, to avoid the pain of intense exercise. But real physical growth comes when we push ourselves beyond what we think we can do. When we feel the burn in our muscles. When we gasp for breath as we push for one more rep or one more mile. This process is painful. It makes us sweat and ache. But it's through this process that our bodies become stronger, more flexible, more capable of meeting the challenges of life. In our intellectual lives, growth comes through grappling with ideas that challenge us. It's comfortable to stick with what we know, to surround ourselves with people who think like we do. But real intellectual growth comes when we expose ourselves to new ideas, when we engage with perspectives that challenge our own, when we're willing to admit that we might be wrong. This process can be uncomfortable. It can make us feel uncertain and insecure. But it's through this process that our minds expand, that we develop critical thinking skills, that we become more open-minded and intellectually curious. Now, let's talk about how we can cultivate a mindset that embraces suffering for the sake of growth. First, we need to reframe our understanding of pain and discomfort. Instead of seeing these as things to be avoided, we need to see them as signals of growth. When we feel that discomfort, that stretch, that burn, whether it's physical, emotional, or intellectual, we need to recognize it as a sign that we're growing, that we're pushing beyond our current limits. Second, we need to develop a growth mindset. This means believing that our abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort, good strategies, and input from others. When we have a growth mindset, we see challenges as opportunities to learn and grow, rather than as threats to our self-image. Third, we need to practice self-compassion. Embracing suffering doesn't mean being hard on ourselves. It means being kind to ourselves as we push through difficult times. It means recognizing that growth is a process, that setbacks are normal, and that we're worthy of love and respect even when we're struggling. Fourth, we need to cultivate patience. Growth takes time. It's not always a linear process. There will be setbacks, plateaus, and moments when it feels like we're moving backwards. But if we can maintain patience, if we can trust in the process, we'll find that over time we're making progress. Fifth, we need to celebrate our growth, not just our achievements. It's easy to focus on the end goal, on the trophy or the promotion or the finished product. But real growth happens in the process, in the daily struggles and small victories. We need to learn to recognize and celebrate these moments of growth. Even when they don't result in big, visible achievements. Six, we need to develop a support system. Growing through suffering isn't something we have to do alone. In fact, it's often impossible to do alone. We need people around us who can encourage us when we're struggling, who can offer perspective when we're lost in our own pain, who can remind us of our strength and potential when we've forgotten. Now let's talk about some practical strategies for embracing suffering as a tool for growth. One powerful strategy is to keep a growth journal. Every day, write down one challenge you faced and what you learned from it. This practice helps you to reframe difficulties as opportunities for growth. It trains your mind to look for the lessons in every situation, no matter how painful or challenging. Another strategy is to set stretch goals for yourself. These are goals that are just beyond your current capabilities. They should make you a little uncomfortable, a little nervous. They should require you to grow in order to achieve them. Remember, the goal isn't to make yourself miserable. It's to push yourself just beyond your comfort zone into that space where growth happens. A third strategy is to practice voluntary discomfort. This might mean taking cold showers, fasting for a day, or sleeping on the floor once a week. These practices aren't about punishing yourself. They're about training yourself to be comfortable with discomfort. They're about building your capacity to endure difficulty for the sake of a greater goal. A fourth strategy is to regularly expose yourself to new experiences and ideas. Read books that challenge your assumptions. Have conversations with people who think differently than you do. Travel to places that are outside your comfort zone. These experiences might be uncomfortable, but they'll expand your perspective and push you to grow. A fifth strategy is to practice gratitude for your challenges. Each night before you go to bed, think of one difficult thing you faced that day and find something to be grateful for in that difficulty. Maybe you're grateful for what it taught you. Maybe you're grateful for the strengths it revealed in you. Maybe you're grateful for the support you received as you faced it. Now, I want to address a common misconception. Some people here to grow, you must suffer, and they think it means that a life of growth is a life of constant misery. But that's not the case at all. Yes, growth involves discomfort. Yes, it involves challenges. But it also involves joy. It involves the satisfaction of overcoming obstacles. It involves the thrill of discovering new capabilities within yourself. It involves the deep fulfillment of becoming more fully who you were meant to be. In fact, I would argue that embracing suffering for the sake of growth leads to a far more joyful life than trying to avoid all discomfort. Because when we avoid discomfort, we also avoid growth. We stagnate. We become trapped in our limitations. And there's no joy in that. But when we're willing to suffer for our growth, we open ourselves up to new possibilities. We experience the joy of progress, of achievement, of becoming. We taste the sweet satisfaction of overcoming our fears and limitations. The more we grow, the more capacity we have for joy. The stronger we become, the more we can lift others up. The wiser we become, the more we can contribute to the world around us. So yes, growth involves suffering, but it's a suffering that leads to greater joy, greater fulfillment, greater impact. Let me share one more personal story with you. There was a time in my life when I faced a series of setbacks. I lost a job I loved. A relationship I valued fell apart. A project I've invested years and failed to take off. It felt like everything was falling apart. In those moments, I had a choice. I could have given in to despair. I could have said, why me? Why is life so unfair? I could have retreated into bitterness and self-pity. But instead, I chose to see these setbacks as opportunities for growth. I asked myself, what can I learn from this? How can these challenges make me stronger? How can I use this pain to fuel my growth? It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, days when I wanted to give up. But I kept pushing forward. I kept seeking the lessons in the pain. I kept striving to grow through the suffering. And you know what? Those painful experiences became the foundation for the greatest growth of my life. They forced me to reevaluate my priorities, to develop new skills that deepen my faith. They pushed me to become more resilient, more compassionate, more focused on what truly matters. Looking back, I can honestly say that I'm grateful for those difficult times. Not because they were pleasant, they weren't, but because of how they shaped me, how they helped me grow, how they prepared me for the opportunities that were to come. That's the power of embracing suffering as a tool for growth. When we approach our challenges with this mindset, nothing can truly defeat us. Every setback becomes a setup for a comeback. Every difficulty becomes an opportunity for development. So I challenge you today, embrace the suffering that comes your way. Don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Face it head on, knowing that on the other side of that suffering is growth. How can this make me stronger? What can I learn from this? How can this help me grow? When you feel the discomfort of stretching beyond your current capabilities, remind yourself, this is what growth feels like. This discomfort is the price of becoming more than I am right now. When you're tempted to give up in the face of difficulty, tell yourself, I am stronger than this challenge. I will not let this defeat me. I will use this as fuel for my growth. Remember, you were created for greatness. You have potential within you that far exceeds what you can imagine right now. But to unlock that potential, to achieve that greatness, you must be willing to suffer. You must be willing to push through discomfort, to face your fears, to embrace your challenges. It won't be easy. It won't be comfortable. But I promise you, it will be worth it. Because on the other side of that suffering is growth. On the other side of that suffering is transformation. On the other side of that suffering is the person you were always meant to be. So go forward, face your challenges, embrace your suffering, and grow into the amazing person you were created to be. Remember, to grow, you must suffer. But through that suffering, you will become something magnificent. You will become the person you were always meant to be. Thank you, and may God bless you on your journey of growth.